Thank you, Dr. Chandroo, for joining us on Winning Ways here today. It's been a pleasure to have you here with us on this.
Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Chandroo, I mean, you've grown now Modern Montessori International to one of the most sought after preschool chains in Singapore, Southeast Asia, large parts of Africa, India. What keeps you going for the last 25 years? I mean, what's the adrenaline that's pumping you up?
Well, I must just mention about history here. It goes back about 26, 27 years when we first started Modern Montessori. It's a UK program, and we had some difficulties bringing the program to Singapore because the principals were not excited to expand their operations. They were not keen, mainly because they were a bit concerned over the dilution of the quality of delivery. So we had difficulties convincing them to bring it to Singapore. So what I did was I made a trip, visited the principals in London, brought my wife and my brother-in-law, and both were early childhood trained. I convinced them that I've got my own people who are professionals, who are good enough to deliver the programs, and got them to do training in London. So they spent a good amount of time in London training. Thereafter, we had an arrangement where their trainers will come to Singapore and train the first cohort of trainers in Singapore. And we did very well. Our first cohort, we had almost about 80 to 90 students. In a year, we almost had about 3 or 4 cohorts, and that itself is it's a phenomenal success.
Of teachers.
Of training teachers. Now, these were just not, though they are trainee teachers, but potentially they were not ready to go to classrooms, but these were actually eager parents. Now, Montessori was very new then, and parents were, no, they didn't understand what was Montessori. And 20, 25, 30 years ago, parents did not give much importance to early childhood education. They were very happy with their children going to primary 1 and learning, and they didn't believe in early intervention. They didn't believe in, the importance to be given to early childhood education. It was the middle and the higher income group of people who were very interested. So we had the parents, the discerning parents, who were so concerned and so interested in Montessori education that they came to attend the course. We did have a fair bit of students who graduated and worked for us. Our first center we opened in 1993 or 94. That was at Upper Serangoon Bukit Arang. We took over the center. It was a challenge because we were the 4th operator there. The 3 operators were not doing well. So we took over the center. But because we put that Modern Montessori brand name and we had our own qualified teachers, the place was licensed for 90 kids. Within the first 3 months, we already had 60 children. And at that time, 27 years ago, we were charging $895. Now that was very high when across the island, everyone was charging about $300–400 or lesser. But that was the test ground. We succeeded. So from one center, from the teacher training center that was doing very well, we opened the first center, and then the second, the third, and the fourth. Today, in Singapore, we have got more than 30 centers. Close to 4,000 kids are with us. That's just Singapore. Now, of course, internationally, our MMI's brand is in 15 countries. We have close to 100 centers.
So, are you today bigger than the principal? I mean, the number
Of course, of course. I must tell you this. It's a right question, bigger than the principal. In fact, there's no more principal because I've bought into my UK company.
I thought that.
So I own. So I'm both a principal and a franchisor. I thought that was the best approach because our rate of growth was so phenomenal in Asia. And our principals, of course, they started the business more than 40 years, maybe 50 years, and they were getting old. They did not have anyone to take over. So I had the first right of refusal. And I thought that was the best thing to do because no point you grow someone's business in Asia and then they take it over. We have seen many of such stories, you know. So I told myself, no way that I'm going to, you know, lose this brand. So I own this brand 100% worldwide.
Oh, wonderful. So how do you balance your role as an educationist and as a businessman? Because education as a business obviously calls for, you know, much different kind of tunings. So
Yes.
how do you do that?
Interesting, because I mean, I must confess, I'm not early childhood trained. And that makes me purely a businessman. I have an MBA and my PhDs are all in business. So that makes me purely a businessman. And I'm interested in the top line, bottom line. But I'm also an advocate in ensuring that the quality of delivery must be good. So I employ professionals. My wife, she's early childhood trained. She has a master's in early childhood education. Her youngest brother, Bob, who is also with us. In fact, he's one of the directors of the company, academic director. He looks after the academic quality, curriculum development, research. So we are constantly upgrading, constantly doing research in this area, because this early childhood is evolving. So we have to make sure that we are constantly, you know, updated with new schools of thoughts, new researchers. So to answer your question, it's a challenge, because as a businessman, you're interested in the bottom line. But I do employ people, and they are my own people, to make sure that it's, you know, that we play our part as an educationalist as well. Because unlike most schools elsewhere, which are run by trusts, you know, and they are basically, you know, non-profit organization, I must confess ours, we are not, we are for-profit.
So moving on from education, I mean, you've now got interest in cord blood bank, in real estate. So, I mean, how do this, I mean, classical purists would say that, you know, I mean, these are all unrelated businesses, education, cord blood bank. I can understand that cord blood bank probably someday comes back to a Montessori education, but real estate, how do you really manage to do all this?
Sure. One thing I've learned in my MBA, and it says, diversification reduces risk. You know, the old conventional wisdom that says, don't put all the eggs in one basket. You know? So having attained this level of success and having seen a reasonable amount of funds kept in the savings, you know, where your own business don't need the cash anymore, one would want to think about diversifying. And I thought about cord blood from pure one reason. That's because my India partner, Mr. Ravi Japuria, was coming to Singapore, and he asked me, what business you think I should bring to Singapore? And he was already running this cord blood bank, and MMI India is already there. So I told him, yes, why not? Why don't you bring cord blood here? And cord blood, if you were to just do a little study, it's basically storing the cord blood, the blood that you take from the umbilical cord. You go through the process and you store it. Now it's quite related to my business, because we are in early childhood education. Our parents are all young parents, young mothers. So for me, my immediate thought was, I've got 3,000 kids, you know, 3,000 parents are there, mothers, you know, young mothers. So immediately, I've already got a market there, you know, to tap on. And then again, coming back, and I wanted to diversify my business. The other business that I've diversified, again, I do not do business with people I don't know. I've gone into property development with my MMI Thailand partner. He was already a hoteler and a property developer. And because of our synergy, our business working relationship with MMI, he finds me a good partner. And he invited me. He asked me if I would take a small stake. And all these businesses, because I'm new to this business and I do not know anything, I don't take major stakes. I take 20%, 30% equity. But of course, the 20-30 is a sizable sum. But I rather take a small equity and let the major partner run. Because it is by invite that they call me. And for me, it's an opportunity. And I've worked with them, I've done business with them. They're trustworthy partners. And there's nothing wrong in doing business with trustworthy people.
And now you've gone ahead and captured all your learnings of the last maybe 25, 30 years into a book that you released recently about dreaming big.
Yes.
So what really made you, pen down your experiences and put this together? What do you hope to achieve with the book?
I want this book to be a testament. It's the journey that I've taken to be where I am. I wanted to document that journey and put this book as a testament for the future generation. It can be for my own generation and for others as well. Because the journey I took was a tough and rough one. I came from a very humble beginning. My father was a taxi driver. As a young boy, I had to tend my goats. I had to bring my goats to graze grass, at a very young boy, sit down under a tree, have dreams, and it was that young boy's dream that one day when he grows big, he must be rich. And the journey that I took to be where I am, as I mentioned, it was a tough and rough one. And I wanted to share that experiences with others. The catastrophes that one could avert if you're careful in terms of investments, in terms of dealing with people, in terms of partnership, So I was very frank, sincere in sharing my experiences, my exposures to others, because I just want to share this so that if you, your friends, your children can learn something. If I can convince, if I can motivate 10% in my life, I've done something great. But I'm sure you can do more than that. So it was my contribution to society. It's a book titled Reach the Top with Big Dreams. And then I put a thought-provoking question for those who dare to dream big.
So, in today's environment, we see that, the whole, probably like never before, the whole entrepreneurship culture, startups, and there's so much of buzz going around. A lot of youngsters are, instead of going and taking up a job earlier, trying to look at doing something on their own. So, what would be your success mantras for these kind of people? Because obviously, with all the valuation game on one side, there are a lot of people who want to make it rich very fast.
Yes.
So what do you have to say to people, to all these youngsters?
Actually, there's nothing wrong with the young thinking about entrepreneurship. I think it's good, because entrepreneurship is basically wanting to make money. But my advice would be that one must have perseverance, patience, persistency, and as I mentioned in my book, one must be ready to face failures. And interestingly, I've named my first chapter, titled it Embrace Failure. One must learn to embrace failure. Only then he will appreciate or value success. So the young entrepreneurs today, the startups, interestingly, I talk to many startups, and it is just a startup, have not even started operations. They tell me the company's valuation is 3 million, 4 million. I sometimes wonder. But I didn't want to kill their enthusiasm. I think if that is their valuation, if that's what the valuation is, the market valuation, so be it. I think I like the entrepreneur spirit. I think that spirit must keep going, but they should not be greedy. They should have the patience. They should not be quick in just earning money, making quick, fast bucks. Develop something, value it, and then sell it, and then go off, wash your hands. I think that seems to be the attitude. I think that one should move away and look at how conventionally, how big businesses are built. Businesses must be built to last. And in order to build a lasting business, one has got to spend lots and lots of time. It's just like nurturing a child. You can't expect a child to be successful overnight. Lots of time. So, planting a tree, for example, before he bears fruits, I think you need to look after. So, to me, the same principle applies like for a company. You need the prolonged period time to nurture. So if young entrepreneurs can ensure that is done, build a good business which is bringing good revenue, good bottom line. If someone wants to buy it, fine. But then don't be too greedy. Don't create a business, hype it up for the sake of doing so, for the sake of selling, and then run away. No, that is wrong. Otherwise, entrepreneurship should be something that should live within you.
So when you look back at your career now, what would you think were the defining winning ways that really brought you where you are today?
I think the never say die attitude is something that I hold very close to my heart.
Was it, I mean, while you said that when you did your first cohort and the first year of teachers training, it was highly successful. Were there times, subsequently or maybe earlier when you thought that, that it was not really going as planned and, you were kind of frustrated with...
Not when we started the early childhood, not when we started the MMI, but before MMI, I was in direct selling. I was selling Sesame Street children's books. That was in the mid 80s. We started early 80s. By mid 80s, CD-ROM came in, and when CD-ROM came in, it was a very new thing. Everyone were very fascinated. Parents were very fascinated by that, that production. So much so, they started commenting, I think I don't need to buy children's books because all I have to do, I buy CD-ROMs, which cost about $80 to $100. I switched on, my child, doesn't disturb me and I don't have to read. That became a challenge in the mid-80s. And I saw a decline in the sales of my children's books. That was when, at the same time when my salesmen were going out, selling door-to-door children's books, we got feedbacks from parents that, hey, I'm buying your books, but I don't have time to read. And then my children, I don't have good kindergartens to send to. So then it dawned on me, and I asked myself, since there is a decline in sales of this children's book, why not do something? And instead of doing something vertical, I did a lateral expansion from children's books to early childhood education because I saw a need, so I leveraged on that need. So I think one must be able to see that, see the niche, see the need, leverage on it. And even in early childhood today, for example, today if you would ask me, everything is going fine and we're doing very well, but the challenges are there. What are the challenges? We are dealing with a new generation of teachers. Now the new generation of teachers, their attitudes are different, very different compared to say 20 years ago. So we have an acute shortage of manpower. The whole industry, since there's a shortage, it's good for teachers, so they go from one school to another. So if one school offers them $2,000 salary and another school prepared to give them $2,200, they will run there. And then after being there for 3 months, another school offers $2,500, they run there. And that's no good for the industry. Currently, unfortunately, that's what's happening. So that's challenge. Another big challenge for us compared to 20 years ago today is rental. For example, this big place here is a state of the art, but it's costing us $45,000 of rent. So that's a challenge. Rent, salaries. Today, rent and salaries can take up as much as 80% of your revenue. So what about other expenses? Your A&P. So today the bottom line for early childhood educational service providers, the bottom line is very thin. And if it becomes too thin, then my worry is quality will be compromised. Right?
So when you made all these decisions to get into different businesses, whether it was your lateral expansion from selling books to starting early childhood education or subsequently other areas, did you follow your absolute gut instinct, or what made you take these decisions?
Of course, in business you need that gut instinct, but more that from children's books to early childhood, more that I saw the demand there. But my gut instinct more for my properties investments. For example, MMI, we have two buildings. At that time, 10 years ago, less than 10 years ago, there were no takers for commercial buildings. So my gut feeling say, why can't? Because I was paying very high rent at Orchard Towers. So why not invest? No regrets today. It is appreciated. Likewise, most of our buildings that we occupy, they all purchased. So that again, you know, that was more gut feeling. That gave me that to go and invest. But business, usually I do my sums. Business, for example, MMI's business, before we go into an area, we do our sums, we do our math, we do our survey research to see if there is, you know, a need for that place, a good school. We look at the investments, and then we go ahead.
You mentioned about embracing failure as one of the first chapters in your book. So is there any decisions that you regretted in your span of 25-30 years as an entrepreneur, where you think that there was something you could have done better, you probably failed, and then you came on to do it much better?
Failure, when I said embrace failure, it was just plainly to tell my readers, people who read my book, just to tell them that it is important one should accept failure. You see, a lot of us, we fear failure. And the moment we have that failure, you don't want to think about success, because the fear of failure overcomes that success element. And that was something that I wanted to strongly, you know, make a mention, that embrace failure. Don't worry about failure. And I've given many examples of my own failures itself. I said, there is nothing wrong in failing. And I gave a very classic example of how God has taught us that value, you know, about a child. Before the child could start walking and running, the child has got to crawl. And crawl after crawl, to even before start walking, the child has got to move on slowly, hook on to the chair, slowly climb up the chair. But that process, you know how many times the child would have fallen?
Yeah.
Before he really start holding and walking. That is the moral of the story, that God has taught us, that be prepared to fail. Fail many times doesn't matter, because your ultimate goal is success. And if you've not seen failures, if you have not seen anything disappointing, and you've been seeing success all the while, one little failure can put you down, because you have not seen failure at all. So I think one must be ready to face and take on the challenges.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Chandroo. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.